Hello and welcome back to the Novice Lumberjack, where I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. As I sit in front of a big old shelf of gasoline-powered chainsaws, because my channel is a chainsaw channel, I'm going to talk about something a little different today, which is electric vehicles. And this is how I see it. I am no pro on the matter, but I think that I am pragmatic at the least, and I'm smarter than the average bear. But this video, I am hoping to catch Pete Buttigieg's attention. I doubt that I will, because I understand he's a busy man, and I am a huge fan of Pete Buttigieg. I love watching him tear interviewers apart and make them look silly and foolish. But anyways, my thoughts from a common citizen here about the electric vehicle and gasoline vehicle situation that we are facing today. So let's get into it. Okay, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, the way I see it, the whole world has been sold on the idea that EVs, electric vehicles, are the answer to a lot of our problems, such as our fossil fuel problem, meaning we're going to run out of it, as well as the damage to the environment that our fossil fuels are doing. The world seems to have jumped on this and said electric vehicles are the solution to this problem, or at least a big part of the solution. And I disagree with that. So let's talk about some of the inherent problems with EVs. While we know that the vehicle itself obviously produces less emissions by a huge margin than gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles, they are not without their own problems with pollution and what they're doing to our environment. And that, the battery production and recycling of those batteries. Okay, so the production is questionable to say the least, because we see all sorts of different reports of the lithium being mined by slaves, and just simply digging it out of the earth is just a really, really nasty process. So it's not clean. It's pretty nasty. And then what do you even do with those? There's no real way to even recycle those batteries as far as what I'm seeing. And even if there is a way to do it, it's not being done. Let's not fool ourselves. It isn't being done. Those are going into landfills and such. We all know that. The other problem is power to weight ratio. The EV vehicles are typically 1,000 pounds heavier than a standard vehicle. And while that doesn't seem like it's too big of a problem, it actually is a real problem, because that's like every single vehicle carrying 1,000 extra pounds. Oh, excuse me. And so what we see with that right there is, a standard passenger car is putting the same amount of burden on our road system as a large truck would be. And a large truck is putting the same amount of stress on our road system as a loaded down truck would be, a heavily loaded down truck. So that's a real problem. That creates problems in the present and in future to come, with a lot of extra money being spent on road maintenance that shouldn't be there. Because if you imagine, 50,000 vehicles traveling a specific road in a day, right? It's getting 50,000, no, I'm sorry. It's getting 50,000 times 1,000. It's a lot. What is that? 5 million extra pounds of weight put on the actual road. And our roads are bad enough as it is. So that's a real problem. Not to mention consumables, such as brakes and tires. It takes more to stop and move these vehicles, and our consumables are being used up more quickly. The tires wear out faster, the brakes wear out faster. There's all sorts of problems whenever you talk about the actual weight of these vehicles. Obviously, we have simple problems such as charge time, travel distance. You can't go as far in the electric vehicles. Is that a problem with the environment? No. But it is a problem with just common sense. You need your vehicle to go as far as possible, and then whenever it stops going, you need to be able to refuel and keep going. Charging stations are few and far between, and whenever you charge, it takes a long time. You're in a long line of people, and not to mention there's problems with the environment with cold weather causing these vehicles not to even run. And so there's real legitimate problems there, okay? So let's talk about that for just a second. Building an infrastructure to support these EVs. How much money is that going to cost? Come on. Realistically, it's massive, massive. We all have heard that our electric grid cannot support these EVs, and a lot of our electric grid is still with dirty power. You know what I mean? Whether it's coal, in many places it's coal. As we're still burning coal for energy, right? Or it's nuclear. And nuclear, yes, I know that there are people that would argue that it's clean. It's cleaner than some sources, not as clean as others. Whatever. I don't want to get into any of that. But you produce nuclear waste, bro. and so that's still being used to charge these vehicles. It's not like we're using solar power to charge these vehicles. So the idea that they're clean is just folly. Cleaner than gasoline? Somewhat, yes. It is somewhat cleaner because the end product itself doesn't pollute the way that a gasoline or diesel engine will. Truly, absolutely. However, the power source is not clean at all. It's doing serious damage to our environment, right? And the recycling of those products, whenever it comes time, is not clean. The actual factories that are being used to build these vehicles are just normal factories that are using fossil fuels to run, and they're just as dirty as anything else. So the idea that EVs are actually cleaner than gasoline is not wrong. It's just so minuscule. Why are we doing it? Why are we focusing our efforts to making these vehicles whenever they're just not good enough? Okay? That's what I'm saying. Another thing is that, we know that the fossil fuels is not sustainable. We're going to run out, right? We know this. No one's arguing that. Battery's not sustainable either. We're going to run out of lithium. And I know that there's some other battery sources. What is it? Sodium. I think I've got it right here. There's some new stuff with, where's it at? I just saw it. Sodium ion batteries. And so they're completely, they're trying to get away from the need of critical materials. So we are getting better at battery technology for sure. I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating on this battery technology, because I'm not. I think it's actually pretty dang great. But we're putting so much effort, and we're trying to transfer all of what we already have and is in place with gasoline and diesel, and we're trying to transfer it over to electric. And I'm asking the question, why? It doesn't seem to be good enough on a magnitude that is worthy of being approached. See what I'm saying? So let's talk about some the gasoline vehicles. All right. We know fossil fuels are bad for the environment. And no one is, I don't think anyone is arguing that, okay? We also know that we're running out of them, you know, and it may not happen in the next month, but yeah, we're using them up. That's when we're incapable of creating more fossil fuels, as far as I know, right? Another big problem that I think, and I think that this is probably the biggest problem, and we'll get on into that, is that the EPA and government guidelines have workarounds that the manufacturers have exploited, and that's why we have the vehicles that we have now. Again, we'll come back to that. We'll get onto that. All right. The biggest problem is customers are too easily sold on Mo Power, baby. Right. The idea, and this carries into what the last comment, you know, about the guidelines having workarounds. The idea that your average guy can go out and buy a truck that's capable of towing 35,000 pounds, I think is folly, and it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. You know, anyways, so let's look at some solutions the way I see it. Again, a common dude, all right? The electric vehicle, while nice and works for certain people, like, you know, a vehicle like the Nissan Versa, right? That's an all-electric vehicle. That's great for someone who lives in the city and they got a short commute back and forth to work. It's inexpensive. It does its job. Great, all right? No problem there. However, America is large, and a lot of people have to drive long distances to and from work. My wife, she's got an hour-long commute one way going through the city, and she would only be able to do that in an electric vehicle probably a couple times before she needs to charge it. And so then you go, well, it takes energy to charge that vehicle, you know? It doesn't just come from the air, you know? It takes energy to charge that vehicle. So anyways, my point is electric vehicles, as they are currently and as they are being developed even, I see no difference. I see no change in the future. Electric vehicles can be made to work and work well for a certain amount of our population, but on the whole, no, they're no good. So what we need to do, number one, bring back small trucks. Trucks have gotten huge. You can no longer even buy a small truck. I have one of the smallest trucks on the market, which is a Nissan Frontier. I could not get it in a standard cab. All right, I wouldn't have, but you know, I wanted the extended cab. I'm 6'2", so I need that extra space. So, but I couldn't even get it in a standard cab, and I also couldn't even get it with a 4-cylinder engine. Only V6 is all they had. And you look at that, and it's the cheapest truck on the market. And I still paid, now mine's 4-wheel drive, and it's got a few little options, you know, not much, it's pretty basic. But I paid $36,000 like out the door for that truck. $36,000 for the smallest, cheapest truck that you can purchase in America. That's ridiculous. But part of that is inflation, I understand. But the bigger part is the guidelines that the EPA and the government set up to dictate vehicles and their efficiency and their environmental impact. Well, the manufacturers just skirted around it. And they said, you know, it's based largely on the size of the vehicle, like the wheelbase and the width and things like that. And so if you've got, say, the old Toyota truck, the old Toyota Tacoma from the 90s, let's say. That was a small little truck. Well, with that footprint, they required this, well, I don't know what it is. They required this level of efficiency, right? Well, the manufacturers just was like, well, we'll just make the truck bigger. And they just made it a little bit bigger, which allowed them to have a less efficient engine, right? And this cycle went on and on and on. And they were like, passenger cars need to be this efficient, right? You need to be right here. Well, the manufacturers was like, well, an SUV will hold a lot of passengers, but it's considered a truck. So let's skirt around that. And that's why we have so many SUVs, because the manufacturers were shoving out, and they found that they could build them really cheap and actually ask a premium price for them because they were so big and luxurious, and they could ask a lot more for those SUVs compared to what they were building them for. So the profit margin was off the charts. So the manufacturers just started selling SUVs, forget the passenger vehicles. So that's how the manufacturers, some of the ways that the manufacturers got around the EPA and government guidelines on how to, what they were requiring the manufacturers to do to make efficient vehicles. Well, the manufacturers just was like, let's just make everything bigger so that we can go to the next level of emission standards. And so we can just get by that altogether. And instead of building passenger cars, let's just build a bunch of SUVs, right? So that's a huge part of our problem, okay? And my suggestion, along with, bring back small trucks, right? Bring back small trucks. The Toyota Tacoma was awesome. The S10, the Ford Ranger, the little stuff, fantastic, right? And if we had the technology that we have today, right, in those little trucks, oh man, we'd be getting 36 miles to the gallon, maybe more, 40 miles to the gallon, 50 miles to the gallon. But what we have done, and this is part of the big problem, is the population, okay? But before we get to that, let's talk about the number 2 on the solution, is to quit wasting time and effort on a cause that we know to be limited, right? The way that I see it, we've got 10 to 20 years before we figure out a better solution, maybe sooner than that, before we figure out a better solution than electric vehicles. It's going to happen, right? We need it to happen. It has to happen. So it will happen. So put faith in the future and force manufacturers to start going in finding different ways. I don't know how you could do that. I got to be fair. I don't know how you could force manufacturers to come up with a better, cleaner energy. But the idea that we're going to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on electric vehicle charging stations because electric vehicles are actually better for the environment than gasoline vehicles is folly to me, because I think that gasoline vehicles would be better for the environment if we did number 3 on my solution list, which is force the population to deal with lower horsepower, smaller vehicles. I've got a good friend, Scott, I'm talking about you, who drives a Toyota Tundra, all right, back and forth. It's his commuter. That thing gets about 13 miles to the gallon. It's big 4x4, and he has no use for it whatsoever. I mean, every now and then he has hauled some pine needles, I think, and wood chips for putting around in gardens and stuff like that and walkways. But that's pretty much it. That's the only time he's used that vehicle for hauling anything, really. So he's got a 400 horsepower, 6,000 pound truck that gets 13 miles to the gallon. That's the problem. All right? Or one of the biggest problems. Okay? That's one of the biggest problems. We have become so accustomed to that kind of lifestyle that, well, it's just awful. It's causing problems across the board because the Ford F-150, roughly a brand new one, is going to cost you about $65,000, for a nicely equipped brand new Ford F-150. Now, the Ford F-150 Lightning is also about the same cost. You can get them more expensive and less expensive, I know, but realistically, they're both about 65 grand, right? Why is this happening? Why is a regular citizen who has no need for a truck at all, why are they buying a $65,000 vehicle that's capable of towing over 10,000 pounds? 10,000 pounds! And it gets 13 miles to the gallon. It's got four-wheel drive whenever you have no need for four-wheel drive whatsoever. It has a payload capacity of probably close to 2,000 pounds as far as what goes into the bed, the cargo capacity. What is the point? Well, the manufacturers did it because they're constantly in a war with each other to produce the biggest, baddest thing, because that's what sells. And so somehow we need to convince the population that they would be better served with a more practical option. But there's hardly any practical options out there. Like I said, my little Nissan Frontier only came with a 6-cylinder engine, right? I was wanting a 4-cylinder engine. I was, but it not even capable of getting it. That's a problem. And the idea that the average Joe can go out and purchase a truck, now it's going to be expensive. It's going to be over $100,000 probably, but you can get that big Ford with the big power stroke that's got, I think they're getting up to 1,000 horsepower now from the factory. And you can tow 35,000 pounds with that. I got a buddy. He's got not a bobcat. He's got a cat, right? A skid steer, forestry mulcher, all that stuff, big fifth wheel trailer and everything. And I'm like, my God, man. That is a huge load, and it's a regular truck. Yes, it's a Ford F-350, but they're the same size as an F-150, footprint-wise, and I'm like, it's a regular truck, and you can tow 35,000 pounds? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to jail if I ever get pulled over. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to jail? It's like, hauling this much weight requires a CDL. Maybe it's 36,000 pounds. I don't know. But I look at that and I'm going, you shouldn't be able to do that in a regular truck. So used to, back in the 80s and 90s, everybody got everything done the same way that we get everything done now. But they just did it at a slower pace. Instead of driving 85 miles an hour down the interstate, hauling 30,000 plus pounds in your big Ford F-350, you should drive 55 miles per hour. And you can do it with 200 horsepower. The original Cummins that was put in the Dodges back, the old 12-valve Cummins, I think it was only rated at like 170 horsepower, and it had like 340 or 380 foot-pounds of torque, something like that. People pulled everything with those. They got fantastic gas mileage and they didn't break. So we need to, I think, put extremely strict rules on manufacturers that will not allow them to produce the horsepower. Because, and here's my reason, like you guys all watching this, I know I got a lot of guys that are going, you're an idiot. Bodie, you're an idiot. Blah, 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 blah. Hear me, okay? Which would you rather have? A $100,000 truck that has DEF, I think that's what it's called, DEF, that has this turbo that always goes out and costs $20,000 to $30,000 to replace that shit. Doesn't get very good gas mileage because now they're producing so much power, they're only getting, 13, 12, 14, who knows. You're not getting very good gas mileage with those, right? Or would you rather have a $40,000 truck with a 12-valve Cummins that never breaks and gets 23 miles to the gallon loaded or unloaded? But you can't go 85 miles an hour on the interstate. That's the kind of thing that I think that we need to convince our population that's where we need to go. Because most people buying a truck have zero need of 400 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque. I had a 2016 Dodge Ram. It was a two-wheel drive, had the 5.7 Hemi, had 400 horsepower. Did I like having that 400 horsepower? Shit, yes, I did. Absolutely. And it got great gas mileage, too. It got, like, literally on the interstate, I would regularly see over 20 miles per gallon, but sometimes I'd see 22 and 23 miles per gallon. But would I have preferred to have 200 horsepower and 40 miles to the gallon? Yes. Yes, I would have preferred that. And that's what we need to convince the world of. If we could go to that kind of situation to where instead of getting maximum power, we get maximum economy, I think it would be better for everyone. If you took the new transmissions that are like 9 and 10 speed transmissions, the automatics that are in all the vehicles. My Nissan's got a 9-speed transmission. If I took that transmission and I mounted it behind an engine from the early 90s, still pretty efficient, but low power and everything, and I aimed at making that engine efficient instead of powerful, because my V6, I think it's got 315 horsepower. 315 horsepower, right? If I had that same efficiency of that engine with 170 horsepower and that 9-speed transmission in an old school S10 or the old school Nissans, shit, man, I'd be getting 40 miles to the gallon. And my truck would be able to do everything that I need it to do just the same. You know, it'll carry you down the road at 75, 80 miles an hour. You're just going to do it getting way better gas mileage. And so there's just some thoughts on, I think that if we went in that route, it would be better for the economy than electric vehicles. Electric vehicles just aren't the answer. They're not sustainable, right? So we're taking something that already isn't sustainable and replacing it with something else that isn't sustainable, right? Fossil fuel is not sustainable. Electric's also not sustainable in the way that we do it now, right? Maybe it will be in the future, but currently, no. So there's no benefit in that regard. The electric vehicles are a lot heavier, which causes infrastructure problems. Also, infrastructure problems is, how do we charge that many vehicles? We can't do it if we switched over. And so we're going to have to spend billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to get better electrical grid infrastructure. And then ultimately, it's going to be for nothing because electric is just not the solution. So my thought is that we need to switch up, force the public into smaller vehicles, force the public into lower horsepower, and the lower horsepower combined with our modern efficiencies, right? We have better, cleaner burning engines that just operate more efficiently. We have better transmission that operate more efficiently. I mean, used to a standard transmission always got you better gas mileage than an automatic. Not the case anymore. The automatics are actually getting better fuel consumption than the standards. And so if we combine our knowledge of efficiency today with the cars and the level of power of the 1980s and 1990s, then our gasoline engine vehicles would actually be more environmentally friendly than electric vehicles. But I'm just a regular dude and no one's going to listen to me. I'll probably have a lot of you guys say I'm an idiot because you want to keep your high horsepower vehicles, and you'll say, I can't do what I'm doing unless I have this. Yeah, you can. You just figure out a workaround. You know, you can do it. They did it in the 90s. The 350s of the 90s were only producing about 235 horsepower, 225 horsepower, something like that. People used them. The diesels of the 90s, the Cummins is really easy to look at. The original 12-valve Cummins engine, even the 24-valve was good as well. But those original 12-valve diesels pulled everyone's equipment. They got there. They got there. They may not have gotten there at 85 miles an hour on the freeway, but they got there. They lasted for 200,000 or 300,000 miles before they had an actual engine failure, and they did it getting 23 miles to the gallon. In a big 4x4, 3/4 or 1-ton diesel. Imagine if we took that and combined it with our efficiency knowledge of today. It'd be fantastic. And bring back the mini trucks. Bring back the mini trucks. I mean, my Nissan's rated to tow 6,500 pounds. That doesn't sound a lot nowadays, because what we're so used to is all trucks being able to pull over 10,000 pounds. Only 5% of truck population is going to ever pull more than 10,000 pounds. That is a shitload of weight. And then my little mini truck is capable of pulling 6,500 pounds. That means I am capable of loading that thing up with and it's a mini truck. I can take a tandem axle car hauler, load onto it an old C10, a Chevy C10 pickup truck from 1971, right? Because that whole load that I just described is less than 6,000 pounds. And I can tow it with a little teeny tiny Frontier. That's too much weight. I shouldn't be capable of doing that. You know, I mean, our expectations are way off the mark of what we should be expecting out of our trucks. Instead of expecting 400 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque, and the ability to tow 10,000 pounds, we should be expecting 225 horsepower, 250 foot-pounds of torque, the ability to tow 6,000 pounds, maybe, right? And get 40 miles to the gallon. That's what we should be expecting. But we've gone so far off of the edge with our vehicles, it's absurd, you know? And it's not just America. The European vehicles too, you know, some of their cars over there, you know, they do it too. Like Mercedes, Benz, that'll do 160 miles an hour. It's a big luxury car. What is the point of that? You know, we're spoiled little brats. And everything that we get done over here with a big F-350 or Dodge 3500 or whatever, they're doing the same shit in Taiwan with a little beater. So anyways, just my views. Pete, I would like to invite you to come on my channel. I know that you never will, but you can contact me at bodiechainsaws@gmail.com. You can find my email address in the About section of this channel, and I would freaking love to have a conversation with you about it. You're kind of my hero, dude, and I would love to question you on this and get your real thoughts of how to fix some of the problems that are in our transportation system, you know.